You're listening to Saturday Morning Media. And now, back to our show. Here we go.
Welcome once again to the Grantcast. My name is Grant Baciocco. It is a pleasure to have you here. Thanks for listening. Thanks for downloading. Thanks for checking out the Grantcast. And a big shout out to all the Saturday Morning Media Patreon patrons who help make this show possible. Seriously, if it wasn't for them, this podcast would have died years and years ago. So if you want to blame somebody, blame them. I'm kidding, of course. If you want to find out more about the Patreon patrons, hang out after the show and we'll talk more about it. Well, what's been going on? Well, I talked about this before. I started a personal YouTube account where I have been talking about sort of creativity on the personal YouTube account, and every week I've set a goal of myself for 20 weeks to release a video once a week about creativity for 20 weeks. I don't know why 20. I have kind of more ideas, more than 20, but 20 was my initial goal, just to see if it got any sort of traction. I will tell you after 9 weeks, not really, not much, not a lot of traction. Some very nice comments. People are liking it, and I get some nice comments about it, but is it having the, not that it was going to go viral, but is it having the effect of getting a lot of views? No, not at all. But we shall see what happens as we get closer to 20. The other thing I've been doing on that channel is every day, I've done this for the past 108 days. I have played the Apple News mini crossword puzzle and recorded it, and then posted that online. And some of those videos do really well for whatever reason. They'll get like 600 views or 400 views or even just 100 views on those is crazy to me. And that has been great. But what I wanted to do in conjunction with that is to release the creative videos and the daily crossword videos as TikToks on TikTok and build up my own TikTok channel. Because here's the thing, folks. In this day and age, when there's absolutely no puppetry work whatsoever in television and film, there's literally zero productions going on here in Los Angeles right now. You got to find income streams the way you can. And I just thought, well, if I build up this channel, maybe that could become yet another income stream that can help survival. So that's what I was doing. And right before, it was November 30th, I think, I looked it up yesterday, I started this TikTok channel. I'm not going to say the name of it, and here's why. I can't get into it. I can't log into that channel. I logged in, I think for the first 2 days. I did a lot of posting. I was posting advent calendar stuff. I was posting a couple of the TikTok videos. I was posting a couple little puppet things that I did. But then somehow I got logged out and I cannot get back into that account. And it's very, very frustrating. I do not know which email I used to sign up for that account. And yesterday, I'm recording this on March 10th. You'll be hearing it later after that. But yesterday, on March 9th, I spent probably about an hour going through every possible email address that I have and trying to figure out which email address it is and which email address it isn't. And actually, I have a bigger list of email addresses that it is not than anything. And you're probably like, why do you have so many email addresses? And it's just for different projects. So I have my personal email addresses, and but then, for Throwing Toasters, I have grant@throwingtoasters.com, but then I also have info@throwingtoasters.com. For Dr. Floyd, I have info@drfloyd.com, but then Dr. Floyd also has a Gmail account, so I can, Dr. Floyd used to have a YouTube channel, so I could run that YouTube channel. Anyway, yada, yada, yada. I have all these different email addresses. I can't figure out which one it is, and here's what I would love TikTok to have. I would love TikTok to have a thing that would just be like, I can't log in. Can you send an email to the email address just saying someone is attempting to log into your account? Because then I would at least know which email address I used to log in, because right now I do not know. I have no idea which email address it is that I used to log in. So I would love to keep uploading, but I can't. And it's very, very frustrating. But that's not what I'm here to talk about today. I wanted to talk about two, I don't know, inspirations necessarily, but two people. Well, one is an inspiration for sure, and then the other is somebody who I liked very, very much. I want to talk about, I went to go see The Galaxy of Phil Hendrie, which is a one-man show put on by Phil Hendrie. And I'm not sure, I probably have mentioned Phil Hendrie here on the Grantcast before, but Phil Hendrie was, and I say was, he's still around, but he was a radio talk show host. And the thing is that he would come up with these crazy topics, and then he would have a guest caller on who would, just have wild, just incredibly, often very inappropriate theories. And then callers would call in, like real callers would call in and yell at this person. And the joke was that Phil Hendrie was doing the voice of these callers who were calling in with these insane things. The people were not real. It was just crazy thoughts. I'm trying to even think of one that I could say. But like this, Bobby Dooley is one of his characters, and she is the homeowner association president of Western Estates. And they did a thing during a heat wave where they were only going to let the air conditioners run during certain hours. And then she went over because this one neighbor of hers refused to turn off her air conditioning, and she went over and she turned off. She had her husband cut the cable for the air conditioning so it shut off. And then it turns out that the neighbor was like an elderly woman and she passed away from the heat. So not funny, but it was funny in this thing in that it's not real and it's so outrageous. But people were calling in and yelling at her like, you killed this woman, you killed her. And maybe that wasn't the best example, but it's very funny when you're listening to it. And he has since left radio, and he just does a podcast now with all the characters. I kind of do miss the people calling in, but the stuff he does now is funny. But anyway, he's got this great ability where he can talk in different voices at the same time. And not at the same time, but he can like he can have whole conversations with himself in 3 or 4 different characters all at the same time. And it's really brilliant. And it is something that I won't say I do as well, but something I kind of do with Toily when Toily is doing his live streams. So it was very cool to get to go see Phil Hendrie live, go see him do what he does on stage. And it was very inspiring too, because he always talks about how he's not a stand-up comedian. And he doesn't do well in stand-up situations, and that's exactly how I feel about Toily. I think I have performed stand-up places with Toily, but I don't think Toily is a stand-up comedian. I think Toily is better suited for, I don't know, a cabaret type show, or like this one-man show that he did. So is very, very, very cool, and it was great to see him. I met him very briefly afterwards, and he was super nice. So big, giant fan of Phil Hendrie, and glad I got to go see him do his show live. The other person I want to talk about is Buster Poindexter. We lost David Johansen, a.k.a. Buster Poindexter, just a few days ago, and it was very strange, too, because the night before they announced he passed away, I was like, oh, I want to look up Buster Poindexter. I was just like looking on YouTube for different music to listen to. I have YouTube Premium, so there's no ads that pop up. So I just sometimes will go through and listen to songs. And I was like, oh, I want to listen to some Buster Poindexter stuff. And I looked it up, and then the next day they announced that he had passed away. Now, probably what inspired me looking up Buster Poindexter music was about a week or so before, they did say that David Johansen had stage 4 cancer and was not doing well. So it wasn't just some cosmic coincidence. I'm sure that was in my head, and that's why I looked it up. So I was listening to him stuff, and I was sorry to see him pass, because I have a lot of memories of Buster Poindexter. The first one, and probably why he is such an important memory, is one time I must have been in junior high. Sorry, I just got a mail message. I must have been in junior high, And I think it was the when I graduated 8th grade and was going to go into 9th grade. But this I was out of school, and my brother was invited to a friend's birthday party, and they were going to have a swim party. And so the mother of my brother's friend asked if I could kind of be like the lifeguard, and just kind of like, I could swim in the pool, but just kind of keep an eye on everybody. And I was like, yeah, sure. Okay, I'll do that. So I did that, and it was a couple hours, and I don't know what day of the week it was, but it must have been like a Saturday, or I don't know, something like that. And the party ended, I would say, around, I don't know, 3 or 4 or something like that, maybe even later. And we dried off, we got in the car, and both of my parents were there, but they were friends with the parents of my brother's friends, so it wasn't weird that they were there. But we get in the car, and we're just chatting, we're talking about the party, but I kind of realize that we aren't headed home. We aren't going back to our house. And I was like, wait, where are we going? Why aren't we headed home? And I don't remember exactly what my parents said, but they were like, oh, well, we're headed, so we got to stop somewhere else first before we go home, blah, blah, blah. And then my mom said, look in the back, because at the time my dad loved like kind of Chevy Blazers. So we had a Chevy Blazer, and it has like kind of that way back area. That's what we used to call it, the way back. Can you get that out of the way back or whatever? And in the way back, my mother and father were in the front seat. My brother and I were in the bench seat. That's like kind of the second row. And then behind us is a little storage area, or the way back. And they said, look in the way back, and there was something covered with a blanket. There was like, I don't know, all this stuff. It was covered with a blanket. I pulled the blanket off, and it was our suitcases, and our parents were driving us to Disneyland. And it was totally a surprise, and it was very, very cool, and we got very excited. Now, looking back on it, I have to think, you have an 8th grader, and then my brother is 8 years younger than me, so whatever grade my brother was in. And you've just told them that they're going to Disneyland at the start of like a 5.5 hour long trip. So good luck to you, young parents, for that annoying trip with 2 kids who are bouncing off the walls to go to Disneyland. But here's the thing. That Disneyland trip was great. I remember several things about that Disneyland trip, but the main thing I remember is that it was the first time that my parents said, you can go, like when we were in Disneyland proper, they were like, you can go out on your own, but you have to meet back here, right here at, 3:00 or whatever the time was. And so it was like, you can go out and you can do whatever you want to do, but you have to come back here. You can't leave the park. And so it was the first time I was kind of on my own and in Disneyland, and I could do whatever I want. And it was almost like too many choices. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I just started walking around the park, and I walked over to where It's a Small World was, and I was just kind of exploring, and I heard all this music coming from, then it was called Videopolis. Now it's like the Magic something theater or whatever, and they don't have shows there because Disney is so broke they can't afford to pay actors to be in a show. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. The Buster Poindexter was playing a concert in Videopolis. And I walked up, and I just remember walking up to the top of Videopolis and looking down at all the seats. I think I went to Videopolis because Videopolis was kind of the teenager hangout. And I was like, oh, well, that's where I should go because that's where all the kids my age will be. And I remember looking down and seeing Buster Poindexter, and they were singing Hot, 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 which was his big hit. And I got there right at the end of the concert. But he was leading a conga line like down through the audience singing Hot, Hot, Hot. And I just thought that was really cool because at the time, of course, I knew that song. And of course, I loved that song. And it was just really cool seeing the actual Buster Poindexter right there in front of me. it was just very cool. And then my other memory from that same thing was after Buster Poindexter concert ended, I walked over to Space Mountain, and I had never ridden Space Mountain, and I was nervous to ride Space Mountain. And so I just decided I was going to get in line to ride Space Mountain. And I got in line, and for the first time, and it was just me, and I got on the ride. And I was going around and I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. This is so much fun. And then slowly all the lights started turning on. And I have never been on it before, so I didn't know that this was not part of it. And then our car stopped. And I had never been. I was like, oh, our car stopped on the track. What is happening? But all the other cars were still going. Now, what I didn't realize was that the cars were still going because they hadn't reached a break point yet. But they slowly hit break points and they all stopped. But I got really nervous because I was like, the cars are going to smash into us. I didn't say that. That was my inner monologue. And I got walked off Space Mountain the first time I went on it. But it was too late. I couldn't get back in line because I looked at my Swatch watch. Yes, I was wearing a Swatch watch. And I had to go back and see my parents. So that will always, Buster Poindexter will always sort of be a little bit of a symbol of freedom, I guess, because I was able to go do my own thing, and then I saw Buster Poindexter. And thinking about this, later on, when I went to college and I got a job at Disneyland, and so I didn't go home for the summer. In the summers, I stayed with a friend of my grandparents who lived in Yorba Linda, California. Hello, Marge. And I rented out a room from her, and that's where I stayed. And she was great. But I was working at Disneyland, so that's where I stayed. And I was I don't know if it was the Columbia Record House, but it was one of those CD things where it was 6, whatever it was, 10 CDs for a penny, and then they got you, and then you had to buy really expensive CDs. But one of the CDs I got was a CD called Buster's Happy Hour by Buster Poindexter. And I loved the hell out of that CD. I don't drink. I've never liked alcohol, and I have kind of like a crazy attitude towards alcohol, but I love that album. And that album, just top to bottom, is so much fun. And it was an album that I listened to on repeat. And I guess it was a little bit before, but there was that sort of swing dancing craze that came back, I guess mid-90s or whatever. And this was just a hair before that, I think. I should look up the exact year it came out. But I just remember I listened to that album all the time. And even today, up till today, every once in a while, I'll pull out that album and listen to it because I thought it was a good album from start to finish. And other than that time at Disneyland, I never got to see Buster Poindexter live. And I will also say this, I am not at all versed in the music of David Johansen and the New York Dolls. I can't even name a song. But I like Buster Poindexter, I think, because it was fun. And it was upbeat music, and definitely because it reminded me of that trip to Disney World, and connecting it to, that first summer of freedom, first or second summer of freedom, where I didn't have to go home, and I was truly kind of on my own, although being watched over by Marge and stuff like that. But it was another step of freedom, that first step of freedom at Disneyland when I was in graduating junior high. And then that second step of freedom where you don't have to go home, but you're still at college. So you're not just totally on your own. I mean, I guess you are, but you know what I'm saying. Anyway. Thank you, Buster Poindexter, AKA David Johansen, for everything. And you certainly mean a lot to me and meant a lot to me and will continue to mean a lot to me because I will continue listening to your music. All right, well, that's going to do it for this episode of the Grantcast. I want to thank you for tuning in. I really, really appreciate it. We'll be back soon with another episode, and thanks for listening. Bye, everybody. This episode of the Grantcast was made possible by the Saturday Morning Media Patreon patrons who've gone to patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media and set up a pledge for as little as $1 a month. Patrons at the behind-the-scenes level and above get access to a video of the recording of these podcast episodes, and all patrons get the episodes as soon as they are edited and ready to go out. Big shout out to all of our patrons, and a special shout out to our patron producers, Eve Cunning, Kathy Crawford, Tony Urbano, Brandy, David Akers, Paul, Scott Armstrong, Vicky Sebring, Ricky Chavez, Jeff Toro, and Lee Thompson. If you'd like to become a patron and receive episodes of the Grantcast before they are released, visit patreon.com/Saturday Morning Media today and set up your monthly pledge. And thank you for your support. This episode of the Grantcast is copyright 2025 Saturday Morning Media, Grant Baciocco, executive producer, all rights reserved. www.saturdaymorningmedia.com.
You've been listening to Saturday Morning Media. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.